Hello and welcome to A Novel Idea, the show where we usually interview authors. My name is Noelle Boc. I am your host, and today I have with me two guests. I have Brian Coombs and I have Jim Sampas. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us.
So normally I would have an author of a book.
Yep.
And we talk to them about their new work. But instead today, I don't have an author of a book. I have, we're going to talk a little bit about Jack Kerouac's The Haunted Life, and we're going to talk about the album that Brian and cohorts have written that is based on the book, or the novella, really, right? Or part of the novel. I don't know how we're even describing it these days. The Haunted Life, which is called The Last Pink Glow.
That's correct.
That's correct, too. So, the easiest and obvious question is, how did this happen? Who are you, and how did this happen?
I guess I can start. So, I'm the owner of Rocking Horse Studio. You've been there. We're up in New Hampshire, and we've got a team of session musicians who have kind of morphed into a band. And we've written some songs over the years. And our record that came out in 2022 was called Circus of Wire Dolls. It was a sprawling 22-song rock opera inspired by a very minor character in a Thomas Wolfe novel. And I think that had just come out when Jim and I started working on his music up at the studio, and that led to some conversations. And Jim, when I mentioned Thomas Wolfe, Jim had mentioned, Jack Kerouac was a big fan of Thomas Wolfe, and we bonded over those connections. And then Jim, just kind of in passing, mentioned to me, hey, could we do something similar with one of Jack's books? And again, knowing that I'm a big Thomas Wolfe fan, and Jack was a big Thomas Wolfe fan, and I really liked Jim's music, never propose something like that to me and not expect me to go ahead and do it. So, Jim proposed The Haunted Life, and I can let Jim talk about why he suggested The Haunted Life. We read it, we loved it. And we wrote an album with it.
Yep, and what an extraordinary job they did. It really is, right? It's just a truly remarkable work. I think it's going to end up being one of the best albums of the year. Probably win some awards in that realm. And we got to know each other, and I had an incredible admiration for his work. And after listening to the first record by the Rocking Horse Music Club, I was just blown away. And just to note, we're very particular at the estate of who we bring in, especially when it comes to any sort of documentary or film project or album project. I mean, the folks that we've worked with in past album projects were Michael Stipe, Eddie Vedder, Patti Smith, and then we did an album based on Jack Kerouac's Big Sur, called One Fast Move or I'm Gone, with Jay Farrar of Sun Volt and Ben Gibbard of Death Cab for Cutie, two of the most critically acclaimed bands of our time. And I obviously wanted to be sure that we had the right group, and I was just totally convinced that they could really do something special working with this story.
So can I have you back up the teeny bit and just explain a little bit about the estate and who you are in relation to the estate?
Sure.
And Jack Kerouac, right?
Okay, so I am the literary executor of the estate. I worked for the estate in the 90s with my uncle John, who was the literary executor at that time. And then I left. I actually produced a tribute record that got me a lot of work in the music industry, and I was a producer for many years, producing several tribute albums and a couple films. And my uncle passed away, and the family decided that I would be the right person to sort of take the realm.
Who is the Sampas family to the Kerouacs?
Okay,
Good question.
Yeah, there you go. So Jack married my aunt Stella, But as you'll see in The Haunted Life, one of his best friends in the world was a young man named Sebastian Sampas, who had they had very similar tastes in literature, and he was a poet, and he influenced Jack. As a matter of fact, in the beginning of the book of short stories, The Lonesome Traveler, he says, decided to become a writer at age 17 under the influence of Sebastian Sampas, which is kind of neat. So he was very tight with, Jack was, with Sebastian, and got to know Stella, and then later on he marries Stella, my aunt.
And there's the connection. So like, I want to make sure everyone gets that whole connection.
Yeah.
Like how you're really intimately connected with the Kerouacs. They're not just the executor of a estate.
He was
like that.
And one of the primary characters in The Haunted Life is based on Sebastian Sampas.
That's right.
So there are, familial ties,
That's
direct ties with Jim, not just with Jack, but with Sebastian.
Yeah, so I think that's really cool. So now, why did we pick The Haunted Life to?
Well,
it's
really it's an extraordinary work in the sense that some people pass it off as juvenilia or whatever, but
or the predecessor to Town and
the City.
But
but really, it's a truly extraordinary work. I think it's better. I think the writing is better than Town and the City. I don't think that he was, everybody knows he was trying to sound more like Thomas Wolfe. He was very influenced by him. Haunted Life is more of his own writing style. And just like any great work first work of anybody, that's what you get with The Haunted Life. Something truly special. And, you look at the prose, the style of writing, which he later would after Town and the City, he discovered something he called spontaneous prose. But this is a precursor to that, and I think that you can see a lot of similarities between the writing style of this and On the Road, far more so than Town and the City.
It
and
does.
This is just the beginning of a long, fruitful.
And it was funny because when Brian reached out to me and was asked about coming on the show, and was like, oh, and I'm like, you guys know each other, and I thought you must have known each other for a long time because you of course have all sorts of Lowell connections through the Kerouac estate, and then you went to UMass Lowell or Lowell back in the day, and so I was like, oh, you must know each other already, but then you're like, no,
we had
we recently met, and I was like, what?
Yeah, the common acquaintances, little did I know, were you.
Yep.
And Chris Porter, who both of you know, who,
Yep.
again, God bless Chris, when I was at Lowell as a young freshman or sophomore, I think I was a freshman, and Chris was a couple of years older than me, and he was running the radio station there.
Yep.
And I pestered him all year to get my band on, and we were not very good. We had just started, and we just weren't very good.
Right.
And he finally relented, and he did me a huge favor, as it turns out. He booked us to do Live from the Fallout Shelter, but he booked us on the Sunday after finals had ended for the semester.
Wow.
Kind of saving us the embarrassment of people actually listening.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Little did we know it, and I was fine. It was like, great, we're doing the Fallout Shelter, and it wasn't until years later that I thought, wow, he really did me a solid by protecting us from that humiliation.
And of course, I met Jim through Chris Porter.
That's right.
And then course, and that was talking about the beginning of the Town and the City Festival.
That's
so
right.
It all comes
full circle.
Full circle back to Kerouac.
That's right. As a matter of fact, when
really
you
funny.
and I met, it was in the hall that we had the Boston String Ensemble, who end up being on this other album. So anyway,
meant to be.
Everything very, very, very interesting. So talk some about the album, like the actual creation of the writing of it, and why you. I've listened to the album, of course. I've had it on repeat for a few days, as well to listen through. I can tell you some of my favorite songs, but or not. But just it's very interesting to me, what you picked and didn't pick to write about in there. So like, talk a little bit about it, and maybe like you might want to talk. I know The Haunted Life you made a video for.
Sure.
So if you want to like talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So first of all, we decided that we weren't going to do kind of a scene by scene recreation of The Haunted Life. That we had kind of done that with our previous record, the Circus of Wire Dolls, which was an out and out rock opera with a story arc and numerous characters singing. And I enjoyed that. I really, really enjoyed making that. But, we decided we wanted to keep it fewer special guests on the record to let our lead singer, Justin Cohn, shine. Because on Circus of Wire Dolls, although he sings more than anybody else on the record, he was still, as the lead singer in our own band, he was only singing on half the record. So I didn't want to replicate that. And when Jim and I actually talked about, we could get this person to sing, the role of Peter, and this to sing the role of Garabet, and it just, I didn't really want to get trapped in that. So, but it was established really early on that we were going to try to use some of Jack's prose as lyrics for the songs. And I was pretty confident, because that's what we do as songwriters. Justin will bring in a lyric and I'll write music to it, or I'll have music and Justin will write a lyric, or Pat will do, so we were pretty confident that we were going to be able to take somebody else's words and write melodies to them. But where we ran into trouble, I think Jim has been more successful in his work with this. We would run into trouble where we would find a single line, and Justin and I both got the book and we read it, and then we reread it, and we did what I called prospecting for lines that would have potential for songs. And we'd be like, so I had a spreadsheet of, this line is nice, this line is nice, this concept is nice, we should write a song about this. But a lot of times we would come up with one line, and then there was no line to respond to that. So we found ourselves, and I did had that conversation with Jim, like, is it all right if we kind of fill in the gaps, right? So there'd be a line of Jack's or two lines of Jack's, and then we would finish, which, that gave us a little bit more satisfaction as lyricists, that we weren't just taking Jack's work. So we were pretty successful with that. And then we did get one special guest who made an appearance on the record and actually co-wrote a song with us, and that was Tony Banks of Genesis. If you're a Genesis fan, you know that Tony doesn't make very many or any appearances on other people's records. So, people have been asking me since, like, how did you pull that off? And we can talk about that later if you want. But the bottom line was, Tony, so I went to England, and Tony and I worked together, and he said, I've got a couple of musical things I want to show you. And there was one piece that became the title track of the book, but not of the album, The Haunted Life. And it was a beautiful melody. So we brought that home, and Justin and I started, again, the arduous process of, now we weren't just taking somebody else's words and writing a melody. Now we were trying to fit someone else's words to someone else's melody. And Justin Cohn, who's my collaborator in the band, I think he was much more dedicated to the task of, no, Brian, we've got to get Jack in here. Whereas I would be like, it's too hard for me. So let me take one Jack line and let me write the response. So I think you'll find in the verses of that song, it's mostly a single line of Jack and then me, and a single line of Jack and then me. And then we get to the chorus, and it's almost all Jack. And that was Justin's relentlessness of making sure that Jack was amply represented in the song. So the chorus is like almost exclusively Jack's, whereas again, I gave up. I gave up. Right? So, and it also presented an interesting question, right? Because Tony Banks, again, if you say that he's never done anything outside of Genesis in his own solo career, and he hasn't been involved in any rock music since the 1990s as far as recording new music. So there was a huge expectation from the Genesis fan community. And after we met, a photo of Tony and I went viral. And I started to get inundated with, what is this, and what is this about, and when is it going to come out? And expectations soared in the Genesis fan community, which put a lot more pressure on me, like,
right.
Ooh, this has got to be good, right?
Yes.
And I remember when we were tracking the drums, thinking, all right, well, who has Tony Banks, who has played drums for Tony Banks over the years? And it's only some guy named Phil Collins and Vinnie Colaiuta and Steve Gadd and Chester Thompson.
Yeah, some of the
best drummers in the world, right? So no pressure, Mr. Eric Wagley, but we've got to make this count.
Eric's good.
Eric is fantastic, yeah. And then the same thing when we went to do the vocal. Well, Justin, who has sung Tony Banks' songs in the past? Only Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel and Nick Kershaw and Fish from Marillion and all of these big voices, right? And then me as a producer, I was thinking, well, do I take it on a left-hand turn and do something that Genesis fans completely don't expect that maybe Tony would have appreciated? But I was influenced by Genesis. Tony was a driving force in Genesis. We were working with his piano and his music composition.
That's right.
All the projects that I produce, we kind of let the song dictate where it should go. So it sounds like a Genesis track with Justin Cohn singing.
Yeah.
And I let it go. Now, I can tell you, we are rehearsing to do that song live at shows coming up. And we've rehearsed it as an acoustic song.
Oh.
Purely acoustic, with me playing a piano part and Andrew playing the piano melody line on a nylon string guitar. And
nice.
That has kind of, like, when Justin and Andrew and I sat down and worked it out, we're like, ooh, we might want to do this. So we might end up recording an acoustic version because we liked how it started so well.
Yeah.
That's interesting. One of the things that, bringing everything back together again, so I really like the song "The Ballad of Joe Martin." And so when I read the book, when the very first thing, and I was saying beforehand, before you guys got here, that you read those first few pages of Joe Martin's rant, and you can take it and put it in today.
Modern day.
Right?
That's right.
It's and it's a very basic. People feeling disenfranchised, railing against what's going on in their current world or their town, with immigration, with other issues of war looming, work, all the things that we still so it makes everything feel very timeless, right? I was reading it and I'm like, this is timeless.
Yeah.
And I really I was like, wow, like here we are, set in 1941, but it could be today.
Yeah.
And we're reading this same thing, and I liked. I like the composition of that song, The Ballad of Joe Martin. I liked that we highlight just how so many people feel, whether we're saying it's 1941 or whether we're saying it's 2025. So I really enjoyed putting those two things together,
Right.
and
Yeah.
and how much
Right.
it's like just a perfect fit from the book to the song.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, first of all, we were doing the writing, in the lead up to the last presidential election. So yes, these things were front and center, right? But when we sat down to talk about, the Joe Martin song, it was like, wow. And this was another reason about, well, we can't do this first person. We can't have Joe Martin actually singing those words, because that would have had us blacklisted. And it would have been filthy and just not pleasant. So we had that conversation about what is causing him to be this way, and we kind of came to the conclusion that it was fear. It was fear of change and fear of being made, irrelevant. And I was actually just joking with somebody that leave it to Joe Martin to give that we got our first explicit on the streaming services, right?
It makes sense for Joe
Martin. For Joe Martin. And it's interesting too, when we first started talking to Tony about being involved in the project, I sent him a copy of the book. And I thought, ooh, Jack comes out firing right from page 1 on this.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
right.
I had to warn him. I said, Tony, I said, it's a beautiful book. It's a beautiful story. And there's a reason why Jack comes out firing about this character. And so I just wanted to give him that warning. And he was fine with it. But, it was... but yeah, no, I really like how we co-wrote that with a guy named Dusty Gray, who's another person who's been in the studio quite a bit with his own music, and I really like how we treated that. It's we don't sugarcoat it, but we tried to make it human, look at it from his point of view.
Yeah, right. And I think that's one of the really great things about both this book, this novella, whatever we call it, and the record is it really proves the timelessness of Jack Kerouac's writing, right? Like it doesn't matter when he wrote it, it still applies. Like you can still bring it back to today, and I thought that was really powerful. Both reading that and then listening to the music. Like I'm like, oh, this comes together really well. How's the reception been so far for I know it's very newly out, but still.
It has been fantastic. Tony's management has posted about it, which certainly opened up a much larger audience. So we had really, I've had to send cases and cases of physical product over to England because they keep selling out, which is a good thing. And then on the streaming services, got off gangbusters initially with Tony's song, and I was a little bit concerned that Tony's song was going to just overshadow everything else. But that didn't happen. Tony's song kind of pulled the rest of the record to the point now where there are a couple of songs that are outperforming Tony's song. But yeah, I mean, Tony and his management have been so gracious with the whole thing, and there have been a bunch of good reviews. Sometimes I'm surprised about who picks it up and talks about it and who ignores it. There's certain people in certain publications in England who I would have thought, even if they didn't like the record, it still should have been newsworthy that Tony Banks has kind of come out of retirement to work with these guys. And certain people, outlets did take that story and run with it, but certain other ones just ignored it, and I've kind of given up caring about that.
Yeah.
That's good.
We're looking forward to Jim and the estate getting more involved. They had other business dealings that they were dealing with that have been successful.
Yep. That's
and
right.
And if you want to talk just a brief minute about the recent deal that just happened.
Yes, another musician, Zach Bryan, bought a church for us for what we're going to have as the Jack Kerouac Center, which is an extraordinarily incredible thing for the estate and for the community of Lowell. Because he's, pretty much the most popular young male singer-songwriter, certainly live artist. He broke in records. It's selling out his shows, So it's just extraordinary. And he's a really, really wonderful guy, a really, really cool guy.
And a Jack fan.
And a Jack fan. And the other great part about this project, I feel, is it's just, and with Zach, buying the church, and with Rocking Horse creating this record, it's just another way to see Jack. It's another way, as opposed to, we do have new books that we put out. We have our own press and whatnot, three new books. But I think these projects, like documentaries or feature films, which we've done, these music projects turn on a whole different audience, which is really important, I think, to the vitality of Jack's work.
Yeah, and I'm excited to I'm excited if there's more, if there's going to be more, because I say like congratulations on the record. I think it's wonderful, and I've said I've listened through it multiple times at this point, and I'll probably listen to it a bunch more times, and especially as I'm trying to get more deeply into the lyrics now, as because you listen to the music and you don't absorb it, and then you start to like really connect it with the book. And I think this is just such a great collaboration. What a really cool idea to do. So I hope there's more. And sadly, I have to wrap up because we've been already gabbing for over half an hour.
Yep.
So I want to thank you both so much for coming in and talking with me today. For those of you out there, Haunted Life, pick it up, take a read of it as well. And The Last Pink Glow. So is it on like pretty much all the streaming services? I know I've been listening to it on Spotify. So it's on all the streaming services, and can you pick up a physical copy of it?
Physical copy through the band's website.
So Rocking Horse Music Club, you can pick up a physical copy of the music as well. So wonderful. I'm really excited about this project, and I hope to see more, and soon there'll be more. So take a visit to Lowell. Lowell's a great place if you've not been there. There's a lot of there's a lot to like about Lowell. As someone who grew up next door and is involved with the Town and City Festival as well, there's a lot of great places to visit and a lot of wonderful restaurants and sites to see in Lowell as well. And then we'll have this wonderful Kerouac Center coming up as well, which to look forward to too. So, the last parting words, my friends?
I just want to say thank you for having us on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And spreading the word about this truly extraordinary album. Once people listen to it, I think they'll see how special it is.
Yeah, it's great.
It's good to see you again.
And great to see you too. I know them. Well, thank you so much for joining us for the show. Please tune in for our other shows as well, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.